Hi, I'm Wayne and this is Bassador Woodworking. In a previous video, I highlighted 7 table saw accessories that I find particularly useful. In this video, I'm going to go over 5 tools that I have purchased for my shop that I don't get a lot of use out of, and if given the opportunity again, I might pass on buying them. First on the list is this 4-inch bench vise from Harbor Freight. It's the Central Forge brand, and it usually sells for, I think, $45. I paid a little over $30 for it because I bought this a long time ago when Harbor Freight still offered 20% off coupons all the time, and then you could also bundle them with other coupons. So I paid a little bit over $30. This was a complete impulse buy. I was at Harbor Freight buying, I think, a drill press at the time, and this just happened to be in the aisle that I was waiting in line in. So I threw it in the cart, figuring it would be better to have a bench vise and not need it than need it and not have it. So I brought it home and I mounted it on a board. I used it a few times when I was doing more forging and knife making, and I never really liked the vise. The swivel base on it is terrible. You're better off just keeping it locked all the time and moving the board, mounting it to a board and using the board to change the position. It doesn't take much torque to just completely shatter the gear mechanism in the bottom. This is actually a replacement of the first bench vise that I bought because I broke the base on the first one. I have babied this one to the point where I mounted it on the board, used it a couple of times, and it's been hanging on the wall in the shop since I moved to this space. I have never actually had it off of the wall here. So given the opportunity again, I wouldn't buy this vise again. I would save up and get an all steel vise. Next on the list is this little Dremel belt and disc sander. It has a 5-inch disc and a 1x30-inch belt on it. And I got it from a person on Craigslist. I didn't go there with the intention of buying this. I got this packaged with a bunch of sawhorses and with my Craftsman bandsaw. He just kind of threw this in. He was shutting down his shop, and he's like, oh, you can have this as well. So I was like, great, it's a little belt and disc sander. I was in a much smaller shop at the time, so I figured this would be perfect. It took up barely any room, and it's incredibly weak. The entire thing operates on 2 amps, and you can literally just grab the belt with your fingers, and it will just stop. So any real pressure put on the machine, and it's done. So you can't even really use it for rough sanding. So I have a 1000 grit belt on it, and I was using it just to hone pocket knives and stuff like that. But even that, just pressing the pocket knife into it would slow the belt. So it's been sitting up on the shelf, and I haven't even looked at it since I built the 2x72-inch belt sander. Next on the list are these quarter sheet finish sanders. This is not a case of the tool being poorly made or underpowered or not functioning correctly. It's a matter of I don't use them. These are exceptionally made little sanders. This one's close to 10 years old. This one's close to 5 years old. But since I bought a random orbit sander, I have not touched either one of these. So if you're a beginner woodworker and you're trying to decide what kind of sander you should buy, the most utility you'll get out of a hand sander is a random orbit sander. You can do the most things with it. Once you get proficient with that, and once you start finding limitations with the random orbit sander, is when you want to start getting into specialty sanders like a belt sander. The last sander I would purchase would probably be a quarter sheet finish sander. Next on the list is an adjustable dado, sometimes called a wobble dado. These have very much fallen out of favor, mostly because of the limitations of the blade. Also because radial arm saws have fallen out of favor. These were primarily used on radial arm saws, even though you could put them onto anything with a 5/8 arbor. But the way that they worked were that instead of adding plates for a normal dado stack, you just turned these dials, and that would set the width of your dado by making the saw blade run off center. So it would clear more room, and you wouldn't have to keep adding plates and stuff. The problem with that is as you are cutting a larger width with one blade, you create a crown, and you would not get an actual tight fit for your dado. You would be fine on the width, but then you'd have this weird pocket at the end of the board. Yeah, you could fill it with glue, but like it wouldn't look clean all the time. And the larger the width of the dado, the bigger that crown would be. I guess this wasn't as big of an issue when you were doing rabbets and when you were using it on a radial arm saw, because you could do multiple passes and kind of spread out the crown by just making multiple passes. But I have used it a couple of times just to see how it worked and to like confirm the whole crown issue. And yeah, they're terrifying to run. They make your saw shake violently, which isn't surprising because you're running an off-balanced blade. But yeah, I don't know if they still sell these, but if they do, they shouldn't, because they're kind of terrible and I hate it. So don't buy an adjustable dado. This last one might get a reaction out of some other woodworkers, but my last item that I get zero use out of and I probably wouldn't purchase again is a pocket hole jig. The main reason being is that I don't use it. I have used this pocket hole jig in the past a lot. I built an entire TARDIS with pocket holes. I'll put a picture right here. And it was great when I was using it, but the moment that I made a project without having to use pocket holes, I started enjoying my woodworking a lot more, and I never touched the pocket hole jig again. To the point where I had to spend about 40 minutes looking in my shop to find this box because I had no idea where I stored it. And it turns out it was in the bottom of the cabinet for the table saw, and I hadn't touched it since I built that cabinet for the table saw because that was the last time I relocated this jig. I still have all the accessories in the box. So I have the K4 system, and I would clamp it down to my tabletop, and for a while I had it mounted on my board when I was in my other wood shop, and I have all the screws and all that stuff, and I just don't get any use out of it. If it wasn't an expensive jig, I would have gotten rid of it a long time ago. I want to be sure to say that there's nothing wrong with pocket holes, and there's nothing wrong with pocket hole jigs. If there's been any tool or jig that have gotten more people into woodworking in the past 10 or 15 years than pocket holes, I can't think of one. Anything that makes woodworking more accessible is worth investing in and is worth supporting. Anytime I look to use the pocket hole jig, I end up finding what I feel is more efficient and stronger way to make the joint. And I end up not wanting to fuss with this jig and get it all set up, and I don't use it enough to have it mounted in a permanent location in my shop, so it isn't. It sits in a box underneath my table saw until either somebody asks to borrow it or I remember that I have it when I'm reorganizing. And there's my list of 5 tools and accessories that I don't get a lot of use of in my shop and I would likely not purchase again. Thank you for watching. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to keep up to date with new projects as I release them. And thank you.